Angel fans, it's our favorite day. It's Fanmail Friday, and we're answering your questions like this one. Give us your honest evaluation of this Angel pitching staff. Okay, ready, set, go. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SiriusXM by searching Locked On Angels. And if you want to get back to the Super Halo Bros for all the Super Halo content, here's some things that you can do. Leave us a rate and a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe and become a Locked On everydayer. And whether you're watching or listening, come over to YouTube, leave a comment. It's one of the best ways to get in touch with us and be a part of the conversation.
Thanks for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every single day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Mike, it's our third season here at Locked On Angels. We're talking Angels baseball Monday through Friday, and every Friday we get into Fanmail Friday questions, which we love to do. And there were a lot of questions that kind of asked around the same topic, so we've kind of condensed them into the questions that cover the most, basically. And a lot of them were about the pitching staff and the starting staff. So we'll get into those in just a little bit. But Mike, let's talk about that game yesterday, the Angels versus the White Sox. They had Tyler Anderson on the mound.
Yeah, speaking of pitching staff, Tyler Anderson goes 3 2/3 innings, 4 hits, 3 runs, 2 walks, 4 Ks. Threw a lot of pitches, John, 72 pitches. The most he's thrown so far in spring, but not what you want to see in 3 2/3 against a team like the White Sox. He walked back-to-back hitters to start the game, which is really frustrating and something that he's been doing, at least on the Angels, the last year, right? And so seeing him struggle yesterday was not fun. He hadn't walked anybody all spring.
Right.
And so that was a really interesting dynamic to have him start walking some guys. But what were some observations that you made as you watched the game yesterday?
Yeah, there was some, like one of those earned runs, actually 2, I would say, kind of came on some soft contact. So he is inducing soft contact, but somebody just is able to power enough of the bat, to get that over the shortstop's head or fall behind the second baseman. It was like, I don't want to say dinky doos, but they kind of blooped in, and they were just in awkward spots. And so, I mean, you want soft contact from a guy like Tyler Anderson. Unfortunately, it just it didn't work out in the sense that the infield was in, and so stuff was getting over their heads, and so that was a little bit frustrating. Mike, on the strikeout to Luis Robert, he did get 4 Ks through that 3 2/3. He got him to look down at the changeup, and Robert laid off of it, and then it was a 3-2 count, and then he struck him out with a fastball at the top of the zone. And so I thought that was interesting, and so did Tim Salmon, because the hitter is trying to guess along with the pitcher, thinking, oh, he's probably going to throw me another changeup to get me to swing and miss. And then Anderson just threw it right past him. And he's not a hard fastball guy, but he can be deceptive. So again, it was a mixed bag, because there were so many pitches thrown. Those Ernies that he got, the 3 of them, they were, again, like off little bloops and blips and dinky doos. But that's who he's going to be this season. And so you have to take that into consideration. If you're the defense, if you're Ron Washington, if you're Tyler Anderson, he's going to get blooped. And again, you want that soft contact. That's a good thing, but you got to be in the right place for it at the right time. Mike, it's the walks and the pitching counts that continue to bite Anderson. And I'm afraid, and maybe we'll discuss this in a second, but I'm afraid we're at the point of spring training where there was a lot of things to observe at the beginning and think about the ways that Anderson was working up and down in the zone. And obviously you saw the result of that with him getting that K to Luis Robert, which is a hard strikeout to get. He's a really good hitter. At the same time, I would have liked to have seen more forward progress out of the team in this game, because we're about 12, 13 days away from opening day. And maybe I'm just getting a little impatient as an Angels fan because I'm ready for real games. At the same time, I kind of hope that these guys can take steps forward over the next week and a half.
Yeah, speaking of a step forward, I think we have proof that the Angels are listening to Locked On Angels.
I know where you're going with this.
Right? Because, Johnny, where did Mickey Moniak bat in the
He
starting
was
lineup.
he was 6th
Yes.
yesterday. He was
We've
right
been
there in the
saying
middle of
that,
the order.
right? We've been on that. Got a stolen base, went 2 for 3, batting 6th, John.
Yes.
So I think this is proof, right, that the Angels are listening to you and I. Is it proof?
I hope so. Mike, he also got a single off of Garrett Crochet, who's a lefty. And the interesting thing about that single was that it wasn't a fastball in the zone. It was a slider. So Moniak sat on that slider and was able to rip it for a base hit against the lefty. So that was a positive in the the tally for Mickey Moniak there.
Yeah, Adrianza was at second base. Rengifo was at short. And then, John, bottom of the second inning, there was a hard hit ball that slipped off the glove of Miguel Sano.
Yeah.
And Rengifo backed him up actually pretty perfectly at short. Yeah. And that was good to see because we've been talking a lot about who backs up Zach Neto at shortstop. And to have Rengifo play that position, it sounds like, and you said this yesterday, it sounds like they're going to go with Rengifo until they can't go with him anymore. And it seems like that's what they're trying to prepare him for as the regular season starts.
I thought it was interesting that they gave Rengifo the rep at shortstop while Adrianza was at second base, because if this were a season game and Adrianza was on the team, you'll probably see that flipped around. You'll probably see Rengifo at second, Adriana at short. But Rengifo, who missed a good portion of spring training so far, needs those reps at shortstop. And I think that the way he backed up Sano on that one and also threw over to first base, it gave me some good hope that they're working with him over at shortstop. Looked decent out there, in my opinion.
Yeah, Angels Hall of Famer Dominic Leone came in the game for the White Sox in the 8th. Right?
Sorry, it was the 9th inning, not the. I wrote the 8th. Yeah,
for the 9th inning. That's right. And one of those things where it's at the end of a spring training game. Bases are loaded, kind of excited. Joe Adell got a single, right? But the Angels ended up losing that game 5-1. John, I'm a little bit nervous, and I have to wrestle through this idea of no expectations versus what we're seeing in spring training and not getting too frustrated with it. How do you balance that as a fan? Because we have entered this season saying no expectations, yet we really want this team to be successful and we want this team to win. But there are a lot of things to be concerned about because we're going to talk about the pitching staff, but also just with hitting. They're not hitting. Now, I know that Trout's not in this game, and I know that they had some guys in the minor leagues, and they're really just trying to get reps. I understand that. And again, I know it's spring training, but how are you balancing the no expectations versus come on, Angels?
Yeah. I when it comes to no expectations, you want to see what this lineup is capable of when it's the full and complete lineup. Mike, the Angels had runners on second in 5 out of all 9 innings, and they only scored once, and it was at the end of the game.
Very much like last year, right?
Yeah,
very much like
and I understand, like you just said, they're trying to get everybody at bats. They're trying to get everybody reps. Totally understand that. But I'm starting to wonder, at least as a fan and somebody who's wondering how this team is going to look when they have the full and complete lineup, we need at least 3 games next week where it's, your leadoff guy, your Mike Trout at 3, Rendon at 4, wherever they want to put him. They need the full and complete lineup at least 2 or 3 times next week, because otherwise you're going to have situations like this where you only have 1 run when you have a runner on second in 5 out of 9 innings. And that's more of an indictment on the fact that not all of the regulars are in the lineup. But it kind of makes you wonder, would they have been able to deliver had this been, the full and complete lineup in that kind of scenario? I wonder. I mean, there's 12 games. One of those days has 2 games, like a split squad game. There's 12 games left before opening day. So it's going to be interesting to see how many times they run the regular lineup out there. Again, going back to your question about balancing no expectations versus we want them to succeed. I want to see how they will succeed, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And you can't see how somebody is going to succeed or the whole and complete picture if you don't put the whole and complete picture out on the field, if that makes sense.
That's good.
The one thing I'll say is, you see something like Moniak today or yesterday, get the stolen base, 2 for 3 in the middle of the order. That's fantastic. That's something that you should be able to think about. Like, if he's doing that during the regular season, that's probably a recipe for success. Giving Rengifo a rep at shortstop, fantastic, right? And Tyler Anderson, I'm concerned that he's going to keep doing the same things he was doing last year, even though I can see that he's working on getting better at being more efficient. He just did not have an efficient start yesterday. So I just kind of wonder what this team is going to look like heading into the season. And again, trying to hold no expectations, but I want to see the areas in which I believe them to be good, which again, I think it goes back to that lineup. Like I said at the beginning, it just feels like we've kind of stopped making forward progress. And maybe that's too much of an over generalization because obviously Moniak had a great day. Joe Adell got a single, and loaded the bases.
I think that's a good explanation as to what we're seeing, though. I think that it feels like the first week or so was like, wow, okay, we're seeing some good effort. We're seeing some good progress. They're not walking guys. I know that they have some other guys that they've brought in, and it's not the starters. And so there is a lot of negative numbers, so to speak, with some of those guys. But then there is also the hope that this team is always going to continue to take steps forward. And unfortunately, as we've watched the starting pitching staff, we've seen Reed Detmers do that, and we've seen Griffin Canning do that. We've even seen Chase Silseth do that. But Tyler Anderson and Patrick Sandoval have not done that. They've really taken some steps back. And yesterday was a bummer. And it was like, oh, there's the Tyler Anderson that we have come to know and not love, right?
Right.
So that was a bit frustrating to see that yesterday. I guess I would agree with you in the sense like we'll probably get a really good sense as to what this team can do once they do the second round of the Freeway Series in spring training against the Dodgers, because I'm sure that most of the players are going to be in that starting lineup, and we'll get to kind of get a sense as to, okay, how does this lineup function really well together? But if I'm Ron Washington, I want to see that at least next week. I want to see what they can do in back-to-back games.
Yeah.
What does it look like with Brandon Drury in the lineup with Mike Trout? What does it look like with Rendon batting behind him and Sean O'Well hitting second or wherever you decide to put him? And having somebody like a Taylor Ward at cleanup or maybe moving Moniak to – like I want to see what this full and complete lineup can look like, and we just haven't seen that yet. And so that's where my concern comes from.
Definitely. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen every single day. Coming up, is our starting staff competitive enough with the rest of the AL West? We're going to take a look at the numbers and give you our conclusion here in just a minute.
Locked On Angels is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar that you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer from one retirement account with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. I sounded very young generation there. No cap, right? Didn't I?
No
Robinhood
cap.
Gold. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Robinhood.com/boost. Subscriptions do apply. Now, for some Lego mumbo jumbo, John, claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer.
And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every single game of the March Madness tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. So you don't have to fill out a bracket to win big with FanDuel. All you got to do is bet on each and every game, and you could definitely win big on FanDuel during March Madness. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen every single day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Everydayers, mark your calendars because March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 Pacific, the best MLB season preview is coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today, March 20th, 7 p.m., 4 Pacific. Be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it March 20th, 7 p.m., 4 Pacific on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And hey, get this, the free Amazon Fire TV channels app.
All right, so it's Fanmail Friday, and John and I have been accused, and rightly so, of feeding and drinking the hopium. I get it. But we're going to have an honest conversation and an honest look at the rotation, and it's going to get started with a voicemail from Neil in Sacramento. So, John, why don't you play that?
Hey guys, this is Neil from Sacramento. Thanks for taking my call. Locked On Every Dayer on Spotify. I love listening to you when I'm delivering the mail. Wanted your honest outlook on the rotation. Detmers is the only one I feel like I have hope for. He's still young and he got it together at the end of the year last year. Sandoval, I've been watching his last two spring training starts with the A's and the Rangers, and I feel like he can never dot his fastball correctly. So the hitters just are probably waiting for a slider, if they're even thinking like that in spring training, and then he gets mashed. Obviously last year he was, pretty bad. Don't know what to make of Anderson, if he's going to get any better to be what he was like on the Dodgers. And I think Silseth and Canning are still development pieces at this point. Should I have higher hopes for the rotation as a whole, or do you think they're going to kind of get in the way most of the season? Thanks for taking my call, guys. Bye-bye.
Neil in Sacramento, thank you for your voicemail, my friend. What a great question. Mike, what if it's Neil Diamond? Maybe it's Neil Armstrong.
What if it's Neil Armstrong?
No, Neil. He said he listens to us on Spotify while he delivers the mail. That's awesome. Thank you,
in
Neil.
Sacramento, and that's near Oakland. And of course, you're not going to root for the A's. You got to root for the Angels, right?
Right, of course. He's got a couple of great questions here, Mike. And so I think it's important to kind of break that down. Should we have higher hopes for this team, or are they who they are? Or, they are who they are, as we often say.
Yeah.
And so I think there's kind of a couple ways that you can look at this. First off, I know he mentioned Silseth and Canning as kind of development pieces. Remember, Canning has been around a long time now. He's been around since about 2019,
right? And
missed a ton of time with the injury. And so I don't think that you can consider him developing anymore. Yes, he's coming off the injury, but Canning has to have a good year as long as he's healthy. And I think that's the big question for Griffin Canning, is his health. I know that he mentioned Sandoval was pretty bad last year. The truth is, you look at his ERA plus, Sandoval was slightly above league average last year. So while we should temper our expectations of what Sandoval should be based on the 22 season and then the 23 season, it makes me think that an average pitcher or league average pitcher like Sandoval was last year, I guess when you have an idea in your head of what you want someone to be versus what they actually do, it's like, man, what a terrible year that guy had.
Sure.
But the truth is, the numbers show that he was around league average. And while that's not great, it's not horrible either. I mean, we talked about Anderson and what he's trying to do this spring. I think it's TBD with Anderson. So let's get into a few points here, Mike. Higher hopes, or they are who they are? What do you think?
I would have high hopes for Griffin Canning, and I would have high hopes for Chase Silseth, and I would have high hopes for Reed Detmers. Here's the reasons why. Canning, to your point, he's been around a long time, and I think that what we saw last year, he's going to build upon that, and what we're seeing in the spring is him building upon that. Yeah. Chase Silseth was the first guy to go 4 innings in the spring, and he looked fantastic. And then you have somebody like Reed Detmers, who has improved since his really stupid start at the beginning of the spring, right? I think that you can temper expectations and hopes with a Sandoval and with an Anderson. I think Sandoval's great. Here's the problem. It's his demeanor, John. It always goes back to that. And I'm not just talking about him on the mound, but something happens to the team behind him, and they're playing tight. And I think that they're feeling the pressure to really perform behind him. And when you're feeling the pressure versus when you're not going to play really well. Look at what happens behind Griffin Canning. They have an expectation for the ball to get there, and they're throwing it over to first, and it's not a big deal. But for some reason, against Sandoval, when he's playing, they boot it, They throw it, and it's terrible. And they're probably
They
playing
shoot
as
it,
tight.
kaboot
Yeah,
it.
they're probably playing as tight as he's pitching, right? And
Yeah.
so I think Neil, I think you're okay in your evaluations. I would rise in your evaluation of Canning and Silseth. I think that we're going to see two guys who really perform well this season.
I think that we need to remember that Enright and Wash, they have to untangle a lot of mess from the last couple of years, especially for guys like Sandoval and Detmers. The all that mess is left over from the last few years. Bad habits, not throwing strikes. So if you want higher hopes, here's what it comes down to. I think it's two things, Mike. The starting staff, especially guys like Detmers and Sandoval, have had absolutely little to no guidance the last few years from Matt Wise or the coaching staff or things like that. Two, if you want high hopes, you got to believe that Enright is able to identify what's good about these guys and get them to hone in on that. That Enright is able to help these guys correct some things. I mean, look, Sandoval's fastball location has everything to do with his mechanics. And I fully believe that if Enright is a capable pitching coach, which so far he seems to have demonstrated that, then you can figure that out. You can figure out a mechanical issue. Then at that point, it's in Sandoval's hands. Now, if they are who they are, how are we going to know that? Well, they're going to continue to throw too many pitches. They're going to get behind in the counts, and they're not going to get past the fifth inning. And if that is what sticks this season, then I think that's where the cap on this talent truly is.
Johnny, Matt Vore on Instagram asked, is our starting pitching staff as competitive as other pitching staffs in the AL West? What do you think?
Yeah, so I took a look at the starting rotation projections from Fangraphs for each team. Now, the A's have 5 starters whose ERAs project between 4.21 to 4.52. Kind of the only names you can recognize there: Paul Blackburn, Alex Wood, Ross Stripling, JP Sears maybe, but I don't know Joe Boyle very well. The Astros are projected, they have projected ERAs from 3.21 to 4.52. Framber Valdez, of course, is going to lead that rotation. Hunter Brown is somebody who's interesting. And JP France is also a young pitcher as well. Christian Javier had kind of a bad year last year. He's projected to have like a 4.36 ERA. Mike, the Astros have Verlander and McCullers waiting in the wings. They're just waiting to get healthy. So that's going to be interesting to watch. The Rangers projected ERAs from 4.18 to 4.5. They, of course, are going to start the season with Eovaldi, John Gray, old friend Andrew Heaney, Dane Dunning, and Cody Bradford. But they also have Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer, and Tyler Mahle waiting in the wings for this season. Mariners are definitely the best rotation in the American League West. They have projected ERAs from 3.46 to 4.10. That's got Luis Castillo, 3.46 ERA, Logan Gilbert, 3.69 ERA, George Kirby, 3.5 ERA. Like those three right there are really solid pitchers, not to mention Bryce Miller and Brian Wu. Now, to stack that up against the Angels, their ERAs for each of their starters are projected from 4.09 to 4.79. Sandoval's projected to have the lowest, and Tyler Anderson is projected to have the highest. So realistically, the Angels probably sit fourth place in terms of the best rotations in the AL West, with the Mariners leading that charge. But Mike, what the projections might not take into account, kind of what we just talked about. Barry Enright, the pitching approach, the race to strike 2. If they're going to be any better than what the projections say, it's going to be because they aren't pitching the same as they have over the last couple of years. It's going to be because they've been pitching differently than in years past.
Locked On Angels is brought to you by our friends at Amazon Fire TV. Amazon Fire TV is your destination for sports, live games, to highlights, to in-depth analysis. Fire TV is offering an amazing viewing experience. Whether it's opening week for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels that deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. And that includes us at Locked On, by the way, and most big league, pro leagues, and college conferences as well. Fire TV lets you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more. And they also keep you up to date on the latest in the world of sports, not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, traveling, cooking videos as well. So check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. To learn more, visit amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. That's amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV.
Mike, as we get into our last question of the day, this one from Mannyman2112 on YouTube kind of broke into two parts. So let me read the question here because I think it's going to take us back into some Halo history,
Okay.
and I think it's important for us to break it into two parts. But if Barry Enright is the one suggesting all of these improvements for the training facilities, then who's to blame for it taking this long? Is it still on Artie or previous coaching staffs for not pushing for this? And then he said, can you explain the importance of these new upgrades and why it's so crucial to the organization? I have seen some fans online saying instead of focusing on, the pitching labs and the hitting labs, they need to focus on other aspects that impact the Angels immediately in the present. Mike, who's to blame here for this?
Who you are not the father. The lack of player development, John, is to blame, and the investment in the minor leagues. And that goes back to 2010. So
Yes.
14 years ago, right? And the proof of that is the sacrificing of draft picks for signing big time free agents. John, somebody that I've really appreciated and didn't appreciate him at the time when I was an Angel fan at the time, but now as the years have gone by, I've really recognized that Eddie Bain was a great scout for the Angels, and he was fired by Tony Regans in 2010. And here's why he was a great scout. He drafted your boy, Jared Weaver.
Yes.
Nick Aidenhart.
Yes.
Mark Trumbo. Martin Maldonado. He drafted Buster Posey. Now, Posey went to college and then converted to a catcher. He was a pitcher, and then he got drafted by the Giants, right? Chris Davis, who stayed in college. Kyle Hendricks, who went to college.
That Kyle Hendricks from the Cubs. And, and
Tyler Chatwood. Tyler Chatwood from Redlands, by the way. That's close to me. Patrick Corbin, Tyler Skaggs, Mike Trout, Garrett Richards, Randall Grichuk. Do you notice anything about all of those players, John? They're all good, right? They're all major league capable caliber players, right?
Yeah, they were all major leaguers. Buster Posey is going to be a certified Hall of Famer. Now, who knows what his career would have been like if the Angels took him as a pitcher. He got drafted and converted to a catcher in college in Florida. And then even guys like that are pitching now, Kyle Hendricks, is somebody who's, had decent numbers in the later part of his career. Patrick Corbin is still out there. Obviously, Garrett Richards kind of fell off, and it's a shame because he really had a lot of potential there. But gosh, Mike, it just is so silly when you think about Eddie Bain was the scouting director. They really missed out on the next couple of years. And it continues, Mike. The fact is, the Angels couldn't play on the international free agency market when Jerry DiPoto spent all of their reserves for the international free agency on Roberto Baldacchini. And
Roberto.
He got penalized for it, and that did not pan out, and they weren't able to play in the market in future years because of the penalty. DiPoto, to his credit, wanted to bring analytics into the organization, but he was butting heads with Scioscia, and in a way, I kind of wonder if Scioscia, being an old school guy and his approach to baseball, that might have been part why they were behind in that department. At the same time, we see what happens when analytics try to butt heads with an old school manager. We saw that with Perry and Joe Madden, right? Now, the one thing I will say, Artie Moreno sacrificed draft picks for the sake of big free agents. Pujols, Wilson, Hamilton all came at a cost. They traded guys like Patrick Corbin and Tyler Skaggs, though they did get Skaggs back. And to be fair, they traded those two to Arizona to get Dan Herron because Nick Aidenhart passed away. I believe that had Aidenhart not been in that tragic accident, they probably wouldn't have made that Dan Herron move. And so Corbin and Skaggs would have stayed in the organization. But the main takeaway here, Mike,
come on,
the lack of emphasis on the minor leagues and player development and all that stuff, it's really hurt the Angels and put them behind many other teams in the league across MLB. And you see that former coaches have said it, former players have said it, that the Angels are just behind the eight ball and have been for like the last decade and a half, right?
Yeah. And the importance of these new upgrades, it's so crucial to this organization. Here's a couple of reasons why. One, player development. As Barry Enright said, they can identify when a pitcher or hitter is struggling, when they need to do well, what they're not doing well. They know how to fix deliveries. They know how to fix swings, work on mechanics, and they can track motions of arms and swings. And so that's something that they're just not able to do right now. And Enright wants to do that, right?
Absolutely. And then Manny said that there are fans out there that say they need to focus on things that make an immediate impact versus having a pitching lab and whatnot. That's what they've done the last 14 years.
Yeah.
An immediate impact is getting your Pujols and Hamiltons and giving up those first round draft picks because they came at a cost, and they come at the expense of draft picks and minor leaguers that could have helped the Angels. And gosh, you don't see very many successful draft picks from that Dipoto era until Perry Minasian, other than like Taylor Ward, right? Or maybe even Joe Adell or Reed Detmers. But at the same time, you look at the list of what Eddie Bain did from 2004 to 2010, and look how many MLB guys that he got. The Angels sorely need this sort of thing because it's a long-term investment, and the Angels have not done anything in terms of a long-term investment for a very long time. So I'm not sure what fans or what Manny saw fans referring to as in terms of making an immediate impact, quote unquote. But honestly, I'm not sure why it can't be both. Why can't you invest in player development like this and do the short-term immediate impact things that maybe these fans are referring to? Maybe it's signing a big free agent. Maybe it's one thing or another. Maybe it's trading away somebody like Trout to get pieces back. Maybe that's what fans want to see. But at the same time, it shouldn't negate the fact that the Angels desperately need player development. They need pitching labs, hitting labs. They've hired more minor league coaches than they've had in at least the last couple of years. And so it is nice to see that maybe they are starting to move in that direction. And like we talked about the other day, maybe it took somebody like Perry Minasian and Barry Enright to finally convince Artie Moreno that, hey, if you want long-term success, this is the way to go about it. Look at what, the Dodgers are doing or the Brewers or whatever, and replicate that here because you're missing out on future value.
Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Everydayers, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app.
Hey, give us a follow at Locked On Angels on Twitter and at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. Whether you're watching or listening, come on over to today's show, get in the comments section, hit that like button on your way down there. It's the best way to get in touch with Mike and I. Mike, what do we have on deck for Monday's show?
Johnny, we're going to recap all 3 games from this weekend and see what you see what we see, and be able to hopefully be excited about how things are progressing. We're going to pay attention to progression this weekend, and we'll talk about that on Monday on Locked On Angels.
Progression, not regression. Please.
Not regression. Hashtag.
That's right. That's right. All right, friends, we hope you'll come back and join us on Monday. Until then, have a great weekend. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
We want you to take care. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday.
Be progressive. Be progressive. Or aggressive.
Right.